I had never felt so proud in my life. I stood in front of my new home, a lake reflecting the sunset behind me, keys heavy in my hand. This was mine. Every dollar, every hour of overtime, every skipped vacation. Then a man in a dark suit appeared, holding papers that looked official, his expression neutral. "Daniel Hale?" he asked. My parents stepped out behind him. My mother smiled, arms crossed. "We're here about your house," she said casually. The words didn't register. I laughed, nervously. He handed me the documents. My eyes widened. My parents were suing me, claiming I had taken their property and demanding I vacate immediately. Neighbors peeked over fences, whispering. My father's voice cut through my disbelief. "This house was never yours." The ground seemed to vanish beneath me. I felt like a criminal in my own life. I couldn't speak. The officer left, and my mother lingered, smirking. My chest burned with betrayal. My mind raced. 6 years of sacrifice, gone in a single signature. I wanted to shout, to run, to tell the world they were insane. But the only sound I made was a shaky exhale. I knew then life had changed forever, and the battle for my home had begun. I stormed into their living room, expecting confrontation, not the full theatrical spectacle I found. My parents sat with my younger brother, all faces painted with false concern. "You took what belongs to the family," my mother accused, voice tight. "This house should be Celeste's," my father added. I froze. I thought they were joking. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. But the room didn't move. They were deadly serious. My brother's eyes flicked nervously between us, silent but complicit. "You used their money," my mother said, pointing at me, as though the accusation alone would make it true. My head spun. I remembered the 6 years of careful budgeting, the sleepless nights, the overtime, the sacrifices. None of it mattered here. "See you in court," my mother concluded with finality, and left me standing there, stunned. My brother didn't look away, my father didn't apologize, and the weight of betrayal pressed against my chest. I realized then that my family had chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the apartment, trying to reconcile memory with reality. How could they do this? I loved them. I trusted them. And now they were trying to destroy me over the house I had earned. My phone rang at midnight. It was my ex-wife. I didn't want to answer, but a sense of dread made me pick up. "Daniel, you need to know," she said, her voice urgent. She explained that my parents were drowning in debt, facing creditors they couldn't pay, and now they saw my new home as a target. I felt my stomach knot. This wasn't about fairness, love, or even family anymore. It was survival for them, at my expense. Every word she spoke made the situation more dangerous. They weren't just suing me, they intended to freeze my accounts, leaving me financially trapped. I ran through the apartment, imagining them controlling my life from a courtroom. Could they really stoop this low? I thought of my savings, the months of careful planning and my hard work. Was it all going to be ripped from me? "You have to be careful," she warned. "They have done this before. They'll make it look real, and people will believe it." My hands shook as I hung up. I sat down on the edge of the bed trying to breathe. A legal war wasn't something I expected with my parents at 50, but I realized it had already begun. I had to fight, not just for my home, but for my sanity. The next morning I met Jenna Miles, a lawyer my friend recommended. She had an instant reaction when I told her my parents' names. "I've seen their tactics before," she said, voice tight with memory. "Another relative fell for it years ago. They settled quietly, but it was ugly." My stomach sank. Jenna's eyes narrowed. "Daniel, this will go public. Prepare for character attacks." She handed me a seat and began reviewing the lawsuit. Then her laptop pinged. She opened an email, and her face hardened. "This is forged." Attached were documents claiming $120,000 had been transferred from my father to me. I stared. That money never existed. I never touched a cent. But the signatures looked authentic. I felt panic rising, but Jenna's steady hand calmed me. "They planned this," she whispered, "before you even bought the house." My heart sank. The stakes were higher than I imagined. I had anticipated legal headaches, but not deceit at this level. This wasn't just about the house. It was about proving I had lived honestly, worked for every penny, and stood against a family who now claimed I had stolen from them. The courtroom was no longer just a possibility, it was inevitable, and they were ready. Jenna showed me the forged transfers in detail. Every date, every number, meticulously crafted. My father's handwriting, the same as always. But the bank statements proved otherwise. "They set this up months ago," Jenna said quietly. I thought of the 6 years of labor, of frugal living, of patience and sacrifice. Could they really fabricate evidence against me so flawlessly? I ran through the timeline in my head, every payment, every deposit, every bank statement. It matched me, not them. My stomach twisted with rage and fear. How could parents do this to their own child? Jenna looked at me with resolve. "Daniel, they've aimed to make you look like a criminal. If we don't fight this carefully, people will believe them. The weight of her words sank in. This wasn't a simple lawsuit. It was a full-on assault on my life. I thought of my neighbors, my colleagues, anyone who might hear the lies. My hands clenched into fists. I realized that this was bigger than the house. This was about dignity, truth, and survival. My parents had lit the fuse, but I wasn't going to be the explosion. I had to fight, and I had to win. The war had begun.
The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Facebook messages, emails, texts, all accusing me of financial theft, elder abuse, and abandoning my parents. Old friends I trusted turned against me. Comments from strangers piled up under their posts, labeling me selfish, disgraceful, and ungrateful. Panic clawed at my chest. I had never felt so exposed, so attacked. Then, a private message appeared. A link to a closed Facebook group titled Justice for Henry and Susan Hale. My heart sank. Inside, posts painted me as a villain, every word carefully crafted to destroy my reputation. Someone was orchestrating this. Every lie matched details only family could know. My stomach twisted as I realized the truth. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a coordinated attack on my life, my work, my relationships. I called Jenna immediately. Her voice was calm but hard. "They're trying to isolate you, Daniel. We have to hit back with facts, fast." I swallowed, feeling the weight of every accusation pressing on me. One thing was clear. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting to survive the narrative they had spun. And someone close to me was feeding them information. I couldn't believe it at first, but the evidence was undeniable. My brother was behind the Facebook group, posting lies, stirring neighbors, turning my coworkers against me. When confronted, he didn't deny it. Instead, he smirked. "Mom and Dad promised me a share," he said casually, as if that excused his betrayal. My chest burned with disbelief and fury. How could he side with them, against me, his own brother? This wasn't just legal sabotage anymore. It was a full-on familial betrayal. I realized that the lawsuit, the social media attacks, even the character assassination at work, it was all coordinated. Every detail designed to make me look greedy, reckless, or cruel. My mind raced through every interaction, every conversation with him. He had been coached, fed lines, instructed on timing. The thought that my family had plotted this level of deception for months or years was suffocating. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to think. Jenna had said evidence was key, and now I had confirmation. My brother could be a witness if he flipped. But first, I needed to survive the next court hearing. The war wasn't just legal, it was personal, and I would have to outsmart the people who were supposed to love me. Court arrived faster than I expected. My parents rolled in on wheelchairs, a theatrical display of fragility, muttering about their health. The judge's eyes swept over the room, sharp and commanding. I felt my heart pound, palms sweating. They told the judge I had robbed them of everything, sobbing on cue. Every nerve in my body screamed that this was a lie, a performance meant to manipulate the system. The judge, stern and perceptive, ordered a deeper financial investigation. My father winked at me as they left, smug and unrepentant. I gritted my teeth. It wasn't enough to have proof. They were trying to manipulate sympathy. Later that day, I received a call from my boss. Apparently someone had emailed the lawsuit to the company, painting me as a fraud. My career, my reputation, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge. But my boss didn't waver. Instead, he handed me a file containing old records about my father's employment. "You'll want to see this," he said. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. Years ago, my father had been fired for embezzlement attempts. History repeating itself. The pieces were falling into place. The file was damning. My father had a documented history of deception, and the methods mirrored the ones they were now using against me. I felt a mix of fear and vindication. Jenna and I pored over every page. Every detail of his past schemes revealed a pattern, a calculated approach to manipulation, fraud, and family betrayal. As we discussed strategy, my phone buzzed again. Another message, a threat, blunt and chilling. "Drop the case, or your life will get worse." The handwriting, or email signature, was familiar. My father. My fingers shook as I read it. This wasn't just about money anymore. They were willing to escalate, to intimidate, to destroy me if I didn't comply. I leaned back, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Jenna's gaze was steady. "We'll handle it," she said firmly. "The threat is evidence too. We document everything. No one can manipulate the court if we have proof of intimidation." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. The house, the lawsuit, my family, it had all become a battlefield. And I was learning, painfully, that the people I trusted most were my enemies. The war had moved from papers to threats, from deception to intimidation.
Returning home that evening, I found my living room in chaos. Furniture overturned, glass shattered, drawers emptied. My heart sank. I called the police, barely able to speak. When officers arrived, my parents had already called, accusing me of staging the break-in to gain sympathy. I froze. A neighbor approached quietly. She had seen my father sneaking around the property that night, carrying tools. Her testimony could prove everything. I felt a flicker of hope. Jenna advised me to document every detail, every photograph, every witness. The break-in was no longer a minor incident. It was evidence of their escalating manipulation. I sat on the couch, exhausted, adrenaline coursing. Betrayal, anger, fear, they all collided in a storm inside me. The truth was unfolding, and for the first time, I felt a strategy forming. If I could present this properly, I could turn the tide. But the stakes were higher than ever. My own parents had become active adversaries, willing to commit crimes to win a court battle against me. And I realized something chilling. This wasn't just about my house. It was about my life, my identity, and the control they had tried to exert for decades. The following morning, I woke to a pounding at the door. I rushed to check and froze. My father's car was gone, but the door was ajar. Inside, my living room was worse than before. Glass shards sparkled under the morning light, furniture upturned, drawers rifled through. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just intimidation, it was vandalism. I called the police again, voice shaking. They arrived quickly and I explained everything, every detail. My parents had already called, spinning their own story, claiming I'd staged the mess to frame them. I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. But then the neighbor spoke up, quietly, firmly. She had seen my father that night, carrying tools, lingering suspiciously near the house. The officer scribbled notes, taking her statement. My hands trembled, but a spark of hope ignited. Finally, there was a witness. I realized the break-in was no longer just a scare tactic. It was documented proof of their lies. Jenna reminded me to photograph every inch, every detail, every broken piece. The evidence was building. For the first time, I felt like I might survive this. Not just the lawsuit, but the assault on my life, my home, and my dignity. They wanted fear. I was starting to feel resolve. Court came again, and the tension was unbearable. My brother took the stand first. He recited the lines my parents had coached him on, claiming I begged for their money and that they had every right to protect their property. But then, almost too casually, he added a detail that slipped through their careful script. I was told to say that. The words hit the courtroom like thunder. The judge's eyes narrowed. Jenna leaned over and whispered, "He just perjured himself. That can't be ignored." I felt my chest lift slightly. The first cracks in their armor were appearing. The courtroom was electric with tension, every side eye and raised brow magnifying the drama. My parents' faces tightened, their control slipping. The judge called for a brief recess, and I sat, heart pounding, hands trembling. Finally, someone in my family had admitted deception even indirectly. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope. If one lie could be exposed, the rest could crumble. I realized I wasn't powerless. With the right evidence, the truth could finally surface. The fight wasn't over, but the momentum was shifting. When Jenna presented the deed and my full payment history, the courtroom went silent. Every transfer, every deposit, every payroll record lined up perfectly. They proved that I had purchased the house entirely with my own earnings, long before any forged document surfaced. The judge flipped through the evidence, her expression unreadable. My mother's face started to twitch with frustration. I felt a surge of vindication. Finally, the truth had weight. The foundation of their claim, the so-called verbal agreement, the fabricated gifts, was unraveling. The courtroom was tense like a coiled spring. Each document Jenna presented tightened the noose around their lies. My father's jaw clenched visibly. The audience whispered, shifting uncomfortably. I could see their confidence crumbling, replaced with panic and desperation. When my mother began shouting, claiming that I was ungrateful and that the house belonged to her, the judge called to order. The power in the room shifted unmistakably. My parents' carefully choreographed plan was cracking under the weight of facts. For the first time in decades, I felt the scales of justice tipping in my favor.
My mother's explosion shook the courtroom. She screamed about sacrifices, about how raising me entitled her to the house, her words echoing against the walls. Every syllable dripped with entitlement and years of manipulation. The judge, however, remained calm. She ordered my mother removed from the courtroom, her voice sharp and uncompromising. Order. This behavior will not be tolerated. My mother's face twisted in rage, but even from outside, her shouts carried. I sat, trembling, not from fear, but from the release of tension. Finally, her mask of respectability fell away, revealing the raw, controlling force she had always been. I realized something crucial. This battle wasn't just about a house. It was about decades of emotional manipulation, the unseen control she had exercised over me. The courtroom wasn't just a legal battleground anymore. It was a stage where her true nature was exposed for everyone to see. I felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that her theatrics couldn't manipulate the system any longer. For the first time, I could speak, and the truth would be heard. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, I knew I had the upper hand. The financial investigation revealed the depth of my parents' troubles. Nearly $400,000 in debt, loan sharks, credit cards, and even illicit lenders surfaced explaining their desperate motives. Suddenly, everything made sense. Their attack wasn't about fairness or inheritance. It was survival, and they were willing to destroy me to get it. I shivered at the realization. The stakes had escalated. Later that day, 2 men showed up at my door, claiming to be debt collectors looking for my parents. My heart raced, fear mixing with outrage. Jenna instructed me to document every interaction. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was an encroaching storm of intimidation. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The house was more than a home. It was a lifeline, and I was the target. I felt the weight of decades of manipulation pressing down, but also strengthened my resolve. I couldn't let fear dictate my choices. Every document, every witness, every recorded threat became ammunition. I realized something profound. They had underestimated me. I wasn't just defending a property. I was defending my life, my dignity, and the hard-earned independence I had fought for all these years. And I wasn't backing down. I couldn't believe my eyes when I opened my email. A video. My father smirking, holding folders of documents saying, "Sign over the house or your secrets go public." My stomach churned. This was blackmail. I called Jenna immediately, voice tight with anger and fear. She instructed me not to touch a thing and to forward the video directly to her. Within minutes, she had uploaded it to a secure channel and notified the judge. "This shows intent to intimidate," she said. "It strengthens our case and it forces the court to acknowledge their tactics." I felt a flicker of relief. Finally, the intimidation had turned into evidence. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen. My father thought he could scare me into surrender, but instead he had handed me the upper hand. The court would now see his true colors, not the ones he had carefully curated for public sympathy. The power had shifted. No more shadows, no more whispered threats. I felt the first taste of control I'd had in months, and I knew the next hearing would be decisive. The next day, the neighbor's security footage arrived. My parents, caught in the act, tools in hand, sneaking around my property in the dead of night. The moment they tried to break in, the camera caught every movement. Jenna called it a smoking gun, and I couldn't agree more. The evidence was irrefutable. They had lied to the police, lied to the court, and their manipulation had been recorded in high-definition clarity. I watched the frames repeatedly, anger bubbling, but also a strange satisfaction. Their careful lies, their attempts to twist the truth, had collapsed under their own weight. I forwarded the video to the judge, with Jenna's notes emphasizing its significance. For the first time, I felt confident stepping into the courtroom. The intimidation that had haunted me for weeks no longer mattered. This footage wasn't just proof, it was liberation. My parents' empire of lies was cracking, and I could finally see the endgame. Their carefully constructed world of manipulation was unraveling, and justice, for once, felt within reach.
Late that night, my brother came to my door, shaking, pale, guilty. He confessed everything. "They coached me, promised me money, told me exactly what to say," he whispered. I listened, stunned. The betrayal had layers I hadn't imagined. But then he leaned in closer, voice trembling. "This wasn't the first time they planned to ruin you. They've been plotting for years." My mind reeled. Every debt, every lawsuit, every lie suddenly fit into a chilling pattern. But now he wanted to help. He offered to testify in exchange for immunity. Jenna immediately saw the value. His testimony could expose decades of manipulation. I felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. My own brother had been trapped, but now he could become an ally. I realized that the fight was far from over, but with him, I had a weapon my parents hadn't anticipated. The battle was shifting in ways they could never control. For the first time, I felt like we could dismantle the web of lies and finally hold them accountable. He handed me a notebook, my mother's. Its pages were filled with meticulous plans, lists of lies, forged signatures, and even my social security number. Every page revealed the depth of her scheming, a blueprint for years of manipulation. I felt a mix of horror and validation. Finally, I had tangible proof of her intent. Jenna went through it carefully, nodding. "This wins the case," she said simply. I felt the tension in my shoulders finally release, just slightly.
Evidence that had once been abstract now had substance. Every threat, every rumor, every smear campaign could be countered with ink and paper. The notebook was more than proof. It was justice crystallized, a weapon against years of emotional abuse and deceit. I carefully copied every page, photographing each line. The weight of decades of manipulation was finally exposed. For the first time, I felt ready. Ready to face the courtroom again, ready to show the judge the truth, ready to reclaim my life. A surprise witness arrived just as the next hearing was called. A retired detective, someone who had investigated my father years ago, stepped forward. He revealed that my parents had pulled similar schemes against other relatives and even church members. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. My father's face drained of color. My mother's lips trembled. Finally, the pattern of deceit, the long history of manipulation, could no longer be hidden. The judge's gaze was sharp, unflinching. The power balance had shifted entirely. My parents' carefully cultivated image of innocence was shattered, replaced by cold, undeniable evidence. I felt a surge of satisfaction, tempered by relief. Justice was no longer theoretical. It was happening in real time in front of everyone. My father's fainting as the evidence piled up was surreal, almost cinematic. For the first time, I could breathe, knowing that the court now saw my parents for exactly who they were. The tides had turned, and the fight for my home and my dignity was finally tipping decisively in my favor.
The judge's words hit the room like a hammer. Daniel Hale's parents may face charges for perjury, fraud, and harassment. I felt the courtroom shift, the air thick with disbelief. My parents slumped in their seats, pale and defeated. The power had fully shifted. For years I had endured manipulation, emotional abuse, and threats. Now the law was finally on my side. I watched my mother whisper something, probably a desperate plea. "You wouldn't send us to prison, would you?" I looked her straight in the eye and said nothing. The answer wasn't mine to give. Justice wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability. For the first time, I felt free from the suffocating fear that had haunted me for decades. The judge's calm authority left no room for argument. My parents' empire of lies and intimidation was crumbling in front of everyone, and I was standing firmly in the light, no longer a victim. The final hearing arrived, and I spoke directly to the judge. I explained how decades of emotional abuse conditioned me to believe I owed my parents everything, even my home, my money, my freedom. The courtroom was silent. My voice shook at first, but then steadied. Every word carried the weight of years of restraint, of silenced anger, of stolen autonomy. I shared every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to ruin me. For once, my truth mattered more than their performance. I could see the judge taking notes, nodding, eyes sharp and unwavering. My parents' faces showed disbelief, fury, and fear, but I kept looking forward. The testimony wasn't just legal, it was personal, exposing the reality behind their false narratives. I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment. I had spoken my truth. I had reclaimed my voice. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled. I knew the ruling was coming, and it would decide not only the house, but the final balance of our broken family. Judgment Day. The room was tense, almost unbearable. The judge looked over her glasses at my parents, then at me. "This court rules entirely in favor of the defendant, Daniel Hale. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiffs must pay all legal fees incurred." My chest heaved. Relief, vindication, and triumph collided in a rush of emotion. My parents were stunned, mouths open, silent in the face of undeniable defeat. The courtroom buzzed as whispers spread like wildfire. But the judge wasn't finished. She added the criminal charges for perjury and fraud would proceed. Their manipulation, lies, and harassment had consequences. The power I had felt rising over the past weeks now solidified into certainty. My house, my hard work, my life untouched. They had underestimated me, tried to break me, but the law and truth had prevailed. I felt tears sting my eyes, but this time they were tears of justice, not sorrow. For the first time in decades, I felt truly safe. The fallout was immediate. My parents faced investigations for fraud, forgery, and harassment. Their web of deception collapsed piece by piece. Creditors, neighbors, and old associates all saw the truth. My brother moved away, trying to rebuild a life untainted by their lies. I received calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, apologizing for doubting me, offering support. The house no longer felt like just a building. It was a fortress of my independence. I had faced the people who had meant the most and emerged whole. I spent evenings walking through the rooms, touching surfaces, breathing in a freedom I had never known. Every photo, every book, every corner reminded me of the battle fought and won. For once I could live without fear of betrayal from those who were supposed to protect me. The law was the sword, my perseverance the shield, and now my home, the symbol of my life's work, was mine to enjoy. Morning arrived, and I stood on my porch watching the sun rise over the trees. Light spilled across the street, soft and steady like the life I'd finally reclaimed. I chose justice over revenge, letting the criminal investigation proceed. I didn't need to destroy them. They had already lost in every meaningful way. For decades, I had believed that family meant unquestioned loyalty, sacrifice, and silent suffering. Now I understood the truth. Family was not blood alone, but those who stood with you when everything broke. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. The home I fought for, the life I defended was mine, not just in law, but in spirit. I smiled, a quiet, steady smile. They tried to take the only home I ever had, to rewrite my story, to humiliate me, but losing me was the real price they paid. And for the first time in 50 years, I felt free, whole, and finally at peace.